I didn't have that sort of quiz bowl base of knowledge from college and high school. So I knew if I wanted to be at all competitive on a show like Jeopardy, I definitely had to do a lot of foundational work in
Mm.
terms of the actual trivia itself, in terms of catching up.
I am delighted to welcome to All Things Quiz Lynn Yu. Lynn is an author, screenwriter, millionaire winner, blogger, and she runs You Oughta Know, a daily trivia newsletter. Hello, Lynn.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
It's great to have you on. I've been a free subscriber. I really should pay up, but a free subscriber to You Oughta Know. So I've admired your work for a while.
Thank you
Um,
so much.
Before we get on to that, because we will talk about that, I want to take you a little bit back in time. Um, when did you fall in love with trivia, as Americans call it, quizzing, as we call it over here in the UK?
Sure. So as Gareth mentioned at the beginning, my main thing is actually screenwriting and hacking away at the town that is Hollywood. And when I graduated from college, this was in 2014,
Mm.
moved back down to Southern California, started throwing myself at the Hollywood industry machine, and it was very tough. It has continued to be very tough, and I fell into a really deep depression at the time. Um, it was a really tough time mental health wise. And I started attending this weekly pub quiz that was near me with two college friends, and we would go every week like it was church, religiously attend. And it was just sort of a lifeline during a very, very tough time. But I think the thing about it that made it very grounding for me is that it just felt very satisfying to do an activity in which I was asked to know things and know
Mm.
things with certainty during a time where my life was very uncertain and unstable, and I didn't have the answers to anything, and I didn't know what my future looked like. To at least one time a week, be able to be rewarded for knowing things, that was really satisfying. And so from there, that kind of then eventually when I moved to Los Angeles, I found the O'Brien's quiz community, and that has continued to be one of my very regular quiz communities, one of my main communities in life. I eventually found the online quiz community. That's how I know you, Gareth, and how I know a lot of folks who play around the world, and especially during the pandemic, that turned out to be a huge source of um, calm and community and social communication during a very isolating time. So trivia has turned out to be quite a social lifeline from 2014 onwards.
For many people, I'm sure. And it feels or sounds like you kind of drifted into it. You weren't a college quiz bowler or anything like that?
No, I was not a college quiz bowler. I never did quiz bowl in high school or anything like that. So definitely when it came to eventually entering some more serious leagues like Online
Mm.
Quiz League or participating in the IQC, I definitely felt very behind in terms of my quizzing fundamentals. And when it came to preparing for quiz shows, I had to bone up on a lot of things that I think people who did Quiz Bowl or some form of quizzing in their high school or college years um, knew solid. I had to do a lot of study for that.
I know that feeling of trying to play catch up. You decided to dip your toes into TV quizzing. What was it that
Yes.
made you think, I'm gonna put my knowledge and myself in front of a camera for the whole nation to see, and try and answer some questions? And this is Millionaire, I'm thinking of.
Right. So,
Mm.
I mean, Gareth, look, I'll never make more money in less time than I did on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Um, yeah, I mean, game shows were exciting as an opportunity to I never saw it as an opportunity to be on television. Like my mom was always like, "Oh, you're going to be on TV," or friends would be like, "Oh my God, you're going to be on national TV." And to me, that completely unfazed me. To me, it was just an opportunity to win a lot of money in a very short amount of time, and then I would be able to sustain my year or my income with that money through just knowing things, through an activity that I really, really liked.
And you won $50,000 on it, which is a very nice sum
Yes.
indeed. Um, Did you feel when you were on set and, in the chair and answering questions, were you able to just enjoy the experience and enjoy playing the game?
I actually say I don't think I've ever been able to do that because I am someone who does want to win the money and I'm not just there to have
Mm.
fun. I am there because I want to win. So it is very disappointing to me when I don't. I think there's also a sense of identity and pride that's tied to it. You know, I've staked my claim, especially in my friend circles and things like that, as a trivia person. So to go on a trivia or game show and not win, it is a very big blow to my ego and a very big blow to my pride, but definitely something that I have learned over the years to be resilient about and get over.
Yeah, because your self-worth is not bound up in whether you win a game
Correct.
show, in reality. But when you're the one in the middle of that, it's not quite so easy to remember a truism like
Right.
that
Right.
because, you pin all sorts of hopes and aspirations on it. You're worried about what other people will think and disappointing them, and it does become challenging or can become challenging. And I think one of the things that a lot of quizzes, particularly when they go on TV, but also more generally, they focus all of their preparation on winning, but they don't
Hmm.
prepare for defeat. And
Right.
that is going to happen way more often than
Yes. Yeah.
winning for most
Statistically, yeah.
people. Um, Now we'll get on to Jeopardy now because I
Hmm.
think coming out of that will be much more on that sort of how do you deal with defeat thing. You wrote a blog, as you said, on Medium
Hmm.
about I want to go on Jeopardy, and I've
Hmm.
got these three targets, two of which you revealed
Hmm.
at the time, which was winning 5 episodes and a hundred
Hmm.
thousand dollars in one. So you'd really kind of focused. You were very clear. I want the money, which is what you just said.
Right.
So very target oriented as a person. And then you wanted to blog your preparation and how you got yourself onto the show and then ready to perform on the show. And it's a really, really interesting read, and it's covering some of the ground that we've been covering on all things quiz. Um, but what gave you the confidence to put it all out there before you'd been cast on the show? What gave you
Right.
kind of
Yeah.
chutzpah to think, yeah, I'm gonna put my name on the line saying I want to be on the show, I want to win it, and here's how I'm gonna do it.
Yeah. I that's a good question. What gave me the confidence to do it? I mean, I just remember thinking it would be for me, it would be a self-enforcing mechanism if I have to
Mhm.
write about it every week. And I had to be studying for it, you know, I had to be training for it, and I had to be doing all sorts of things in order to prepare for it. And um very LA term in terms of manifesting. I don't know if that manifested my appearance on the show, but shortly after I started writing the blog, it wasn't too long after I think I got the call and I got cast. And so, you know, it was like, oh, okay, yeah, like that's happening. I had been writing about it, I've been preparing for it, and then I got the call to actually go on, I think just a few months after I had started writing about it. But to me, like I mentioned earlier, I didn't have that sort of quiz bowl base of knowledge from college and high school. So I knew if I wanted to be at all competitive on a show like Jeopardy, I definitely had to do a lot of foundational work in terms of the actual trivia itself, in terms of catching up. Um, I remember I started a little Jeopardy Facebook group that was just like a Jeopardy study club with a bunch of other people who were also in the perspective pool to go on the show. And we would meet once a week in those early days to just sort of present on, you know, here are the Shakespeare plays you need to know. Here are like the Native American tribes of America that you should be aware of, things like that. As people can probably tell by now, am a bit of a type A, very goal oriented. Some people might accuse me of being a hustle culture bro type of person. So I love process. I love systems. If there's a productivity book, you know, I will read it. If there's a productivity quiz to be had out there, I will take it. And so to me, I was like, Jeopardy is like my Olympics, you know, I'm never going to make it to the Olympics, but I will get on Jeopardy. So let me sort of document the process of training for it. Um, and for those who haven't read the blog, I kind of went all out in terms of not just preparing for the knowledge portion of it, but in terms of practicing on the buzzer, I bought one of those like a buzzer thing and practiced on a system just to practice my timing. I went sober so that my mind would be clear. I started exercising better and eating better because I wanted to be physically fit too on the day of, not for appearances, but just so my mental clarity would be great on the day of. So I remember at the time I read Tom Brady's TB12 book where he kind of details the insane process he does in order to be an athlete of his level into his 40s. And I think I ended up adopting some of his dieting suggestions and some of his suggestions about, not drinking any alcohol, sleeping better, things like that. So I was fully all in, but that's also the insane personality type that I have, where if I'm very committed to something, I will very much go down the rabbit hole on it.
Yeah, if you commit, you commit 100% because
Yeah,
what's the point of.
110%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And it is interesting because having been on shows where, like Jeopardy, they film multiple episodes in a day,
Yes.
you're on your feet a lot. You've got the adrenaline kind of rising and falling. And I remember being on one show, I'd won 3 episodes, and
Hmm.
on the fourth one, I ran out of steam.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
that physical fitness, that mental fitness, the hydration, all of those things you're talking about, they come into play in an
Oh,
environment like that.
absolutely.
I found it
Absolutely.
really interesting reading your blog about all that, and I'd recommend people have a look. We'll put a link in the description um, to that side of things. So you were very, very tactical, even down to kind of how should I press the buzzer? Should I,
Yeah.
both hands, one hand, one finger like this?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it was I was going to say insanely detailed, but actually it's
Yeah. Insane is just a good word for it.
but the tiny increments of an advantage that you can get from things like that could be the
Hmm.
difference between winning and not winning. And
Totally. Yeah.
clearly that was in your mind when you stepped into the studios for the first time, having done all that, having kind of it's like you talk in your blog about this kind of 3 act movie kind of structure, and
Yeah.
then this might be the triumphant kind of third act. Were you kind of feeling actually I've done everything right now? All I have to do is perform on the day.
That morning, I think at 7 a.m., I was driving over to Sony Studios. I did feel great. I had done everything I could do up to that point. I think I had been sober for a month at that point. Like I felt very mentally clear. I had great energy. I wasn't tired. I felt prepared. And then at the actual rehearsal, everyone gets a chance to play on the buzzer. And I realized that the buzzer, the real Jeopardy buzzer, was a lot larger than the one that I had been practicing with. And I was very bad at it too. I don't think I got in at all during the rehearsal practice. And they had to eventually just let me answer so I could practice answering. But um, I remember right off the bat at the rehearsal thinking, "Oh shoot, it's going to come down to this." And it's very large. It was like too large for my like hand to fit. I think if you watch my episode on the show, I had this whole strategy I was going to do like I was trying to, do it behind the back. I was trying to do it in my left hand, all this stuff, and I end up holding it with both hands because it was so big. And I couldn't, properly grasp it and react with one hand. So, even when that happened, I didn't feel totally thrown off. But then once the game started, I felt like I could not get in against my two opponents who were very good. Um, and I had a friend afterwards who made a comment. What he also lost on his Jeopardy game, and when you're not able to buzz in, it feels like the game doesn't want you to play. And that's very actively how it felt for me in that first round. I was like, the game just doesn't want me to play. I just can't get in against these guys. Ultimately, if you see the scores going to Final Jeopardy, it ended up being fine. But um, I've had the sensation on multiple game shows now, that sort of sinking feeling as the show is progressing and you realize you're not going to win it and you realize it's all that preparation is kind of like going out the window in a matter of minutes.
But you still have to prepare each time as if this is the time. And there is something about the buzzer where until a light on the somewhere on the set
Hmm.
lights up, you can't buzz in. And if you get the timing wrong, you can be locked out, which
Correct.
does give an advantage to the person who's just won a game and
Yeah.
knows how the timing works. So even though you don't done all your prep, you still can't prep that, can you? So there's always an element where there's something out of your control, and then in your case as well, the buzzer being huge didn't help.
Yes. Yeah.
Has that modified how you approach other shows, knowing that actually, even with the best prep in the world, there might be something you're just not aware of in the show's dynamics that might come along?
2022, I then got cast on a show called 25 Words or Less on the Game Show Network. And that was a partner, you had a partner
Mm,
that you went on the show with,
mm,
which in this case was a very good trivia friend of mine, Robert Dimitri, C. Rob Dimitri.
mm,
And poor C. Rob, I made him prep like crazy with me. And
mm,
I think the weeks, or maybe it was a whole month leading up to our tape day. I think we taped in late April or early May. And I remember spending all of April, it was late April. We spent all of April preparing like an insane person. Like we would just run
mm,
drills and like practice on Zoom or in person or what have you. And like you said, there's always something out of your control. So in this case, um the the factor that was out of our control was there's a celebrity guest who is also on your team and assigned to you. And yeah, our celebrity guest kind of shat the bed, so to speak, in his round. And it was that experience was very frustrating to me because we were objectively the better team by all
mm,
standards against the team that we were playing against. I mean, it was not even a close competition. We
mm,
should have won. But right, there's always something out of your control. We
mm,
couldn't control for a celebrity, and so we lost.
mm,
And I experienced that same sort of sinking feeling again, as you know, the celebrity thing was happening, and I was like,
mm,
oh crap, like here we go
mm,
again. Um, and so that was devastating, but not as devastating as Jeopardy was. And
yeah.
then last year in 2023, I went on a show called Split Second, where I took the opposite approach. I did no preparation for this one, but unfortunately, I showed up to the studio sick because I had just come back from London.
Mm. Sorry
And
about that. Yeah.
yeah, no, it's all London's fault. Suffering from jet lag, and I don't want to make excuses for myself
Mm,
for my performance on that game, but um, on that one, I again, by all accounts, should have won it, but just kind of choked in the final round. And I don't blame my sickness. I don't blame anything. That one was just on me. But in terms of the mental toughness and the resilience, for that one, I spent all of about an evening being upset about it, and the next day I had moved
mm.
on. So the turnaround time now for getting over game show losses has become quite fast.
But it does also kind of link, I guess, back to what I was saying earlier about when you pin hopes and expectations and, a perception of your own value onto
Yeah.
doing well on something, um, then that is harder to deal with. When you don't pin any of that on, then it's much easier to get over. But interestingly, reading your blog, you kind of edited it over a period of time of
Yes.
here's
Yeah.
my instant reaction to it, absolutely gutted, devastated. Then a month or so later, oh, can't believe how devastated I was back then, but actually you're still devastated. And it's interesting, entry by entry or kind of edit by edit. It's like that perspective on the process of almost grieving for those
Yeah.
hopes and expectations. What have you learned coming out of that? What are your takeaways that maybe not just apply to quiz, but life in general that you took from that kind of grieving process?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, like you said, I think a lot of it comes down to when you pin a lot of hopes and
Mm,
expectations on the outcome of a game show. And at the same time, I wouldn't suggest that people don't, because I mean, of course you want to win. Of course you want to win a bunch of money. Who
mm,
doesn't want to walk away with $10,000 at the end of a 15-minute game? That would be fantastic. But it's funny because when I lost on Jeopardy that night, I felt like I was, in a waking nightmare, and I went home and I got like fried chicken and like a Coke and watched this Netflix docuseries called Losers. um,
Yes.
because that's how I was feeling. And it was a docuseries on just sort of, these major losers in the sports world. And one of them was on a golf the episode I watched was on a golfer who had just he had the claret jug. It's the one in
Yeah, the Opens.
Scotland.
Are we Jean van der
Yeah.
Velde? Is it?
Yes,
Yes.
yeah. And he should have won it. And he had like
Mm,
mathematically secured it going into the final
mm,
day. And everything just choked
mm,
in the biggest way possible. And I remember sitting there, eating my chicken, being like, oh, I'm like this guy. I relate to this. Um, but he moved on and he got over it eventually. So I think part
mm,
of it was just timing. But the big realization, I think, for me is just, it's just a game at the end of the day. It's just a game. It doesn't affect the world. It doesn't change anything about world affairs.
mm,
Uh, I mean, it would have been nice to have won a lot of money. Yeah, of course I'm sad that I didn't get the chance to score
mm,
big essentially on a game show. Um, but I mean, a lot of it, again, also realizing that there's a lot that's just sort of out of your hands and out
mm,
of your control. And also realizing, I don't know, there's a Buddhist phrase I really love that says, what is for you won't go past you. And I had devoted all this time for Jeopardy specifically. And the reason I had stated that public goal, I wanted to win 5 games, is because that's what you need to win to make it to the Tournament of Champions.
mm,
So I really wanted to get to TOC and be able to play in TOC. Um, and I remember when I lost, I was like, but what is for me won't go past me. I should, like,
mm,
why did that go past me? And then the following year, it was the pandemic year. I taped in January
mm,
2020. My episode aired March 6th, 2020. Um, and I actually at that time was working on a studio contract for Netflix. It was my very first studio contract,
mm,
and that ended up consuming me the entire pandemic writing that script.
mm,
And I remember afterwards thinking, if I had made it to TOC, I wouldn't have been able to do both of these things at the
mm,
same time. I wouldn't have been able to devote my time to the script in the way I wanted because I would have been so distracted
mm,
thinking, oh my God, now I have to prepare for TOC, which is an even harder tournament. So not having trivia in my life because I had lost on Jeopardy cleared out so much space and time for me. And I wasn't
mm.
studying, I wasn't carding, I wasn't watching the episodes. I was focused on the thing I needed to be focused on.
Mm, interesting how things work out. There was another Buddhist quote in your blog, and I'm gonna butcher this quote, so apologies, but it's something that behave as if you're doing the most
Yes.
important thing in the world, but realize that actually you can't change a thing. And I've
That
probably
nothing, none of it
absolutely killed that
matters.
quote, but it
Yeah,
was
no,
something
no,
like
that's
that.
the sentiment. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I really like that as well because that is that sort of, you know, commit to it because it's
Hmm.
important to you. But if it doesn't happen, realize that actually, in the grand scheme of things, it
It really
wasn't
doesn't
that
matter.
big.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good philosophy. Now, during the pandemic, another thing changed. You created You Ought to Know. Uh,
Yes.
I probably just said that in the most English way possible. You
I
ought to
love
know.
that. It was amazing.
How did that come about? Tell us a bit about it, what it is, and then how
Yes.
it came about.
Yeah, so You Oughta Know is a newsletter that I'm currently running on Substack. I put it out Monday through Friday every other
Mm.
week, and it is a current events and pop culture newsletter. The tag is I read The Economist, so you don't have to. Those are the issues from Monday through Thursday, and then on Friday, it's Pop Culture Fridays. So I go over a major pop culture phenomena that you might have also missed because I am someone who is chronically online and always trying to keep track of what the kids are into and up to these days. But the inspiration for that was I wanted to get back into reading The Economist, which I know for a lot of people, it's a very flawed magazine. It's not a perfect publication by any means, but I think in terms of a publication that is covering foreign affairs and global affairs, it still does the best job out of
Mm,
any magazine or publication out there.
mm,
Um, So in high school, when I was doing speech and debate in high school, I used to read the Economist from cover to cover. And I felt like if you lived in a cave and like never interacted with society, but you read The Economist from cover to cover every week, you would know what was happening in the world. And so I wanted to kind of pick up that habit again in 2021, just to sort of keep up on world affairs. And then I decided, you know what? Since I'm already, doing this, I might as well sort of start a quiz newsletter to kind of help everyone stay up on top of global affairs. Um, the double motivation for it was also I think Americans, especially, our media consumption tends to be very solipsistic. We're very focused on ourselves, which is fair. Um, but if you went to someone in France and you asked them who the chancellor of Germany is, they could probably tell you. But
Mm,
I bet you money that if you went out on the street right now in Los Angeles, 9 out of 10 people would not be able to tell you who the chancellor of Germany is.
yeah.
So I think Americans have a tendency to sort of only focus on what's happening in the US and not what's happening globally. So um, my newsletter is very much focused globally when it comes to politics. If you want to know what's happening with the George Santoses and Nikki Haley's of the world in the United States, there's plenty of outlets here that will do that for you. But hopefully, what my newsletter is offering is a look at politics in Latin America or Africa or Southeast Asia in a way that you wouldn't otherwise have consumed in
Mm,
your media diet. And then the pop culture aspect of it is things that I enjoy, obviously the
mm,
big hits of the day, but also the weird things happening on the internet, the weird slang that the kids are into. And it's funny because I originally started this Substack aimed at sort of Americans who aren't really aware of global affairs, but it has grown an audience that is pretty global
mm,
at this point. So I'm very
mm.
happy and proud about that.
And are you very conscious when you're pulling it together of not going over familiar, trodden ground and, throwing in stuff that perhaps is not usually covered?
Yeah, I am very, very conscious of that. And I'm very conscious of, I don't feel like I need to cover the American news that has been beaten to death ad nauseum. So
Mm,
I'm unlikely to put in something about a
mm,
Donald Trump indictment because you can go on any
mm,
news site and you can read about it and hear about it. But for example, something this past year I spent a lot of time covering was what was happening in Thai politics with Peter Limjaroen Rat was a very young, handsome candidate for the Move Forward Party. They had won these general elections, and he was essentially denied the prime ministership by the
mm,
royal elite and the military elite. And I thought that was something that was fascinating. I thought most readers probably weren't paying attention to something like that, but it was also, I mean, Thailand's a very big country and their politics are very complicated. And so something like that is to me interesting to present to readers because it's probably something they would otherwise have missed.
yeah, interesting. So it's a daily newsletter, with the Pop Culture Fridays. So is this 7 days a week?
No, it's
5 days?
Monday through Friday, but
Okay,
every
because
other
7 days
week.
would kill you, wouldn't it? Let's
Yeah,
face it.
exactly. Yeah, and even like Monday through Friday, it takes me about 8 to 10 hours to put together,
Mm,
that week's worth of newsletters. So
yeah.
it is a lot of work, but I do enjoy doing it too.
And you also recently had an end of year competition tournament for subscribers. Um, so if people wanted to find out more about You Oughta Know and subscribe to it, how would they go about doing that?
You can go to yououghtaknow.substack.com. I think we can put a link in the
Yep.
show notes as well. And you just enter your email and subscribe. The free version, you'll get just one email every other week. It'll come out on Mondays. Sometimes you might get some other content. But the paid version, you get all of the issues from
Mm,
Monday through Friday. And I think it's a great community too. If you join us on the
mm,
Facebook discussion group or you find us online, most people who read the newsletter are quizzers. A lot of them are boning up on their current
mm,
events scores and things like
yeah.
that. Some people have said the newsletter has helped them a lot with their current events score for Learned League if you
Yeah.
play in a league like that. Um, and I think it's just a fun way to keep us engaged and keep us in the know about both things that are happening outside of America for Americans,
Mm.
and also about just crazy Gen Z, Gen Alpha things that are happening online.
It's a nice feeling when you spotted something which ends up somewhere else and people get a benefit from. We've done, videos on things like Chinese dynasties and stuff like that, and when it comes up and people go, I knew that because of the song you taught us in the video. It's like
Yeah, yeah.
it's a great feeling. But you also write questions, or have written questions. I don't know if you're still doing it. OQL USA, pop solos.
Yes, yeah.
Do you take that kind of same attitude into those of I'm going to do the stuff that perhaps nobody else is going to write?
Yeah, I definitely want to touch on more diverse
Mm,
topics. I mean, my topics tend to skew a little more contemporary and skew a little
mm,
younger. And because I'm already writing a
mm,
current events newsletter, it's very easy for me to be like, okay, what's happening this
mm,
year? Like, what are the big movies and music
mm,
things happening this year? But I definitely write for OQL USA with an eye towards, hey, let's see if we can do something about Asian American comedians, or
mm,
hey, let's do something on like Korean baseball players, or something that just
mm.
adds a little more of diversity into the question topics.
Indeed, Blackpink, which I
Of
understand is
course. Oh, I'm
one of
so
your favorites.
glad. Yes. Yeah. Don't
Uh,
get me started on them. I will never finish speaking.
so the next question,
Uh-huh.
having done all the many things that you've done, is what next in the world of trivia and quiz for Lin Yu?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm really focused right now on growing You Oughta Know. We just crossed 2,000 subscribers last year. We have readers in all 50 US states and 54 countries around the world. So really focused on getting a global audience, not just for people who quiz, but also people who are just interested in learning more about what's happening in the world around us. And I will also be at SporkleCon this year, which is happening in Detroit in August. So for anyone watching, if you're attending SporkleCon, would love to see you, would love to meet you at the conference itself. And despite having lost on 3 game shows, I'm always up to go on another one and see
Mm.
if I can beat the odds and put into practice those sort of Buddhist thoughts of just letting things go when I lose, if I lose.
Well, maybe the chase.
Oh
Could could
yeah,
could that be your third act, going on there and winning big? Who knows?
who knows?
It would be
Yeah.
wonderful to see. Um, Lynn, thanks so much
Thank you
for
so much,
chatting
Gareth.
today. It's been lovely to meet you and lovely to chat to you. And I'm sure our viewers will be, well, just really enjoying what they've heard today. So thank you so much, and best of luck with whatever comes next, and with You Ought to
Thank
Know.
you.
As I say, down in the comments somewhere down below, or the description, we'll put a link to that so people can find it. But yeah, for now, thank you so much, Lynn.
So thank you.
And if you want to hear more from Lin Yu, check out the World Quiz Awards 2023, where Lin won the Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Award.